Thanks for staying up later. Branford Marsalis is with us tonight. This is his new record, Crazy People Music. I don't even know what to say anymore when I hold, because is it a record? Is it a disc? You can't even say it's a guy's new album.
Yeah, it's a CD. It's a drag, but it's a CD.
If somebody had never heard a Branford Marsalis album, be it on vinyl or on disc, how would you describe what you do? Because it's so diverse, I can't think of a snappy way to categorize you.
You can't. That's the biggest problem with this music, is that jazz music really can't be defined. The only way to, it's like trying to describe French to someone who's never heard it. You know, the only way to really, playing it is the only way. That's the only way that anybody's ever going to be able to even know whether they like it or dislike it, or even know what it represents, is to play the album.
But of course you cross over too.
Yeah.
You've played some rock and roll, you've played what people tend to refer to as jazz fusion stuff, you get into swing music and big band sorts of things. So in that sense you're a little bit less of a jazz purist, I think it's fair to say, than your brother Wynton, who was here.
No, I absolutely disagree. Because I think people like to label Wynton as that, because he doesn't really he's not particularly fond of the music that is the popular medium.
Right.
And I think that they're always accusing him of being a jazz purist, whereas you take most of the guys that put him down, they don't know one thousandth of the music. Couldn't get that out of my mouth. Of the music that he actually knows. So I consider them more so purist than him, because most of the people that put him down for not liking rock, they only know about rock and roll, actually. They don't know anything about symphonic music or anything about jazz. They say they do, but they really don't. They can't speak on it. They don't really know anything about it. They can't describe the music or what it represents or its social significance. And when we discuss jazz, I'm just as adamant about what is jazz as Wynton is.
If you disrespect the jazz art form, then you start to get good reviews, even better reviews. You can make more money. Or any type of profanity or vulgarity, exploitation of teenage sexuality. And plus, since I play classical music and jazz, I always have the option of saying, well, you know, I've played classical music and jazz, now I play pop music, I play everything. You know, I'm the universal man. And just, in general, self-promotion and the acceptance of what in our band we call elevation, which is just, you just hold a big placard which is about yourself. You know, well, I'm doing this and I'm great, the greatest drum player in the world. And
I like other forms of music where he has a tendency to not really like pop music that much. I can understand why he doesn't like it, mostly because of what it represents in our society versus what it really is. And I think he's really right when he talks about that.
Wouldn't you agree that there was a time, pretty decent stretch of time though, when pop music, for the most part rock and roll, or at least what came under the wide banner of rock and roll, was socially significant? That it did move people?
There was that small window, I think the 60s.
Late 50s?
The late 60s. Nah, not the late 50s. The late 50s, it was like teeny boppers, yeah music. You know, everybody was in love and everything was nice, and everything wasn't so nice.
Oh, what about Chuck Berry or Elvis or Little Richard?
They were playing kids' music, you know, and all of the songs didn't really reflect the innocence of the times, or I should say the naivete of the time. Not so much, you know, there were no songs written about the Korean War. There were no songs written about it. Everything was nice.
Didn't the energy and the breaking away that it represented indicate something that was percolating beneath the surface?
It represented a fundamental rift between adults and teenagers.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. For the first time in American society, the teenagers had their own music, you know, and the music was played mostly by adults anyway. But the fact that the teenagers had music that they could embrace, and they were probably ecstatic. I wasn't born then, but they were probably ecstatic that it did not necessarily need the approval of their parents.
And not only that, music either performed by black artists or substantially influenced by blacks was being played by mainstream whites.
That was real wild.
So that was important, whether it was intended that way or not.
That was it was really important that way. I think that the greatest travesty in that is that there were specific instances in time in that social segment of our country when there were a large number of white artists playing the music of black artists and were receiving far more recognition because of the color of their skin than the black artists that they were getting the music from. So I think that in terms of black artists playing music for majority white audiences, it was great. But in terms of them actually receiving the recognition that was due for doing that, I don't even think that's ever come about.
Yeah, there was a period of time, especially in the late 50s, where white-bread white artists were picked to cover songs that had originally been done by black artists, and because the radio stations weren't as receptive to playing the performances of black artists, and then guys like Pat Boone, whether you want to blame him or not.
No, you don't blame Pat. You don't blame the
Pat
artist.
Boone does I'm Walking, and it sells more copies than Fats Domino's sold in the 50s.
No, that's a you don't blame. It's almost like, you know, like trying to blame Larry Bird for being a great basketball player. You know what I mean? You can't do that.
So Larry Bird's a better ball player than Pat Boone was.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the amount of emphasis that is placed on Bird and his place in society versus how he is as a person, and I don't know him personally, but I've seen interviews that he's done, and I see how the respect that a lot of ball players that I do know they have for him, is that you cannot blame the artist for something that is a testimony of our society, because they are not conspirators, as it were. They're not getting together and saying, hey, let's take these black dudes' music and do this and do that and do the other. It's kind of like watching the New Kids on the Block. You know, it's like we as Americans will send our children to watch some little white kids dance like black kids and sing black songs, whereas we will not do the same thing for a group like New Edition, who was the original New Kids on the Block 10 years earlier, you know. You don't blame the guys in that group. You don't blame New Kids on the Block. They're not at fault. I mean, it's just it's a very interesting statement about how we as Americans choose to live and how we see the world. See, that's my point. Most of the people that are successful in our country are manufactured, absolutely. But I think that's basically the nature of the beast. I don't think that you can point to a time when people ever knew who was legitimately good and who wasn't.
Do you think that it's possible that there's so much actual racism, historically and at present, that it's almost always possible that the black person has been victimized in a given situation by racism, and so then it becomes convenient to use as an explanation when further examination might reveal in a given instance that racism is not at work?
Absolutely, man. It's the coolest thing in the world, you know? It's like you're in a debate, like in debate class, somebody's getting the best of you, all you have to do is say racism. I mean, or Zionism, or, you know, anti-Semite. It's that same shield. You just say, oh, it's really convenient to lean on, you know? But, and it works. It works. I mean, I've seen certain political instances when a guy was politically very inaccurate and really not together, and he would say, racism, and everybody would just back off and say, no, not me, I'm not a racist, I'm not a racist.
Yeah, it can be a shield for scoundrels.
Oh, it's absolutely a shield for scoundrels.
You know, criticize me, and your only possible motive is because you're a racist, not because I, as an individual, could possibly deserve to be criticized.
I agree.
Yeah, a lot of people of goodwill find that frustrating, white and black, because it impedes the free interchange of ideas.
No, it doesn't. I disagree with that totally. It really depends on how courageous you are. See, that's what it is. If you are courageous enough to stand up and spot your convictions in the face of the backlash, then I don't see where the problem is. And if I've never seen that charge directly made in any of those instances. I've never seen it made and says, well, no, that's not the issue. And I refuse to allow you to bring it down to that level. But what I do see is a situation like a friend of mine, Spike Lee, right, does this movie, More Better Blues.
Right.
And he has these two caricatures of two Jewish store owners, right? So suddenly he's an anti-Semite. There's a big thing in the New York Times. Spike Lee is an anti-Semite. Now, the one thing that he should never have done was written in a letter to the New York Times defending his position, because that position needs no defense. I mean, from the time that movies have been made, from the birth of a nation, as far back as the first movie, when black people were all portrayed by white people, and all of the enemy wasn't the good black man who was eager to serve his master, but the mulatto who really wanted the white man's woman and the white man's word. That was a gross caricature, right? From the time a movie like Crossing Delancey Street, which I think was made by a Jewish director, and he had some awful caricature, whatever that, what's that word? Stereotypes of black people. Now, see, I, for one, think that stereotypes are funny. For the most part. I like them. I find them very interesting. I'm not offended by them. And the thing that's good about a stereotype, it lets you know what a person's thinking at a given time. What I'm saying is, to call Spike Lee an anti-Semite or a racist for those caricatures is to condemn a large number of revered and respected Hollywood directors, and they should be called racist as well. You know, as bad as Indians running around going, woo, for, you know, I mean, to the brother who was, to the Charlie Chan movies, which won outright disgrace, right? to the black guy in the Charlie Chan movies who's shaking his legs every time the ghost camera says, "Oh, Lord have mercy," you know, to Rochester. I mean, it's like we're talking about a lot of things here.
We're back now with Branford Marsalis. When somebody is a musician, first and foremost, a musician, not an entertainer.
Right.
What's the relationship? Is it possible to describe the relationship between the musician and his instrument?
It's not really the instrument. I don't even think the instrument matters. It's the music. I mean, it could be a kazoo, it could be a saxophone or a trumpet or a violin. The instrument is just a medium that you've chosen, you know, to express whatever ideas you have. It's really impossible to explain the aloneness that one feels when you're dealing with art. And I think that when you say alone, most people think you in a room by yourself, like the movies, you know, sitting at the piano or toiling away and being moody. And no, because there's always an aloneness deep inside of you. There's a spot that no one can ever get to, no matter who that person is. And you find yourself retreating to that spot at baseball games or in the middle of a meeting or at a wedding or wherever. You can't control it. You can't control it. It controls you.
Is that spot usually a sanctuary, or is it simply a spot that you're compelled to visit, and it might be a place of turmoil, it might be a place of peace, you don't know for
No, it's
sure?
not a spot like that. It's not a spot you go to. It comes to you. See what I mean? It's like when you hear a song, you hear a song. It's not like, oh, I feel bad today, I think I want to hear a song. You could be anywhere, and the song comes to you. A guy could crunch on a piece of popcorn, and it'll strike something in you. And at that point, you're no longer where you are. You're somewhere else. And nobody else knows it. Nobody else generally knows it. It's just you're gone. Unless you're a musician, it's really difficult. I mean, you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's not like anything that I can really explain, you know, because you're thinking of things. You're trying to think of ideas in music that are so far-fetched from the average person. You know, the kind of music that we play is so far removed from what the average person thinks about. You're already out there by yourself, you know.
Is being an entertainer and being a legitimate musician with some scholarship, with some reverence for the past, with some appreciation of quality, are those two things mutually exclusive or just seldom in the same place at the same time?
I think that the biggest problem with being an artist is that in the end you are an entertainer. Because the people that are paying to hear you, there's a very, very, very small percentage of them in either symphonic music or in jazz that actually know what you're trying to do. They actually do know. And the rest of the people that are there are people that are like in the middle. They kind of like both. They like one, they like the other. You know, they like pop music, they like jazz, they like classical. Then there are those people who are like the public television crowd. They only watch public television. They only go to symphonic concerts. And, you know, it's what it represents to them. They don't know either. They don't know what they're listening to. So at that point, there comes a certain part of you, and the showman side, where you have to find a way to pull them in. So it can happen one of two ways. You can be like the everyman thing. You can be really, you know, nice or congenial, or you can be a complete jerk, a butthead, you know. You can become, what's that word that they use to describe people with lousy attitudes?
Aloof?
No.
Arrogant?
No.
Schmucks?
No, it's a real nice word that they use for like people like Picasso, eccentric. You know, you become eccentric. You show up to a concert and say, I don't think I want to play now, and you leave, or you play with your back to the audience.
Very temperamental.
Very abrasive. I mean, it's just downright mean.
Sonny Rollins and Miles Davis.
Sonny's not
that kind of stuff.
temperamental.
I didn't say he was temperamental. Didn't Sonny used to put himself behind a post, right? And like you couldn't even see him. He was like playing from behind a post.
See, that wasn't
a pillar.
That wasn't intent. He wasn't doing that on purpose. He was really like that. From what I know from people that, you know, it wasn't a put on. It wasn't a put on. Most guys, I think, is a put on.
Back now with Branford Marsalis. Without sounding overly complimentary, it's pretty obvious that the Marsalis family is a remarkable family. Is there any single influence? Is there any common thread that runs through it that you could identify?
Oh, it's my parents. I think they made the difference. For different reasons. My father's an absolute perfectionist. So is my mother, and with that, she brings a tremendous will that I haven't really seen in very many people.
Your father, an accomplished musician. Your brother Wynton, who we've mentioned several times.
Right.
Another brother, Delfeo, another musician. But then there's a brother who's in his late teens, early 20s, Mboya.
Yeah, and boy is autistic. That was, I think that was real tough on my parents. You know, it really wasn't so tough on me because I was a kid. And,
You're the oldest, right?
yeah, I'm the oldest. I think he was born in 1970. And about 1972, he was real, you know, just like a regular baby. 70, 71. 72, he started acting strange. But I was going to school, so the only time I ever really saw him, boy, was after 3, and sometimes after 7 or 8. So it really makes a difference when you have brothers that are that young. You know, it really doesn't, the impact doesn't hit you until later. Like, you know, now I feel closer to him, boy, than I ever could have as a teenager. My parents went through a lot of hell over that, through a lot of reflection, you know, because they went through the things that everybody go through. They didn't really go through denial, I don't think. I think they just went through, who do we blame for this? First, I think they blamed each other. Then they started blaming themselves collectively. Oh, it's our fault. And sometimes I'll even hear my mom say, well, if we weren't doing this at this time, and boy, you might not be, and she can't, you know. That can't be proven. You know, so I think it was tough on them, but the thing that I admire about my mother is how she made the decision to keep Mboya at home. She was not going to institutionalize him, which, believe me, there's no way to really explain how hard that is to keep an autistic child at home, especially when they get bigger and they're stronger. And she's really made the difference in his life. You know, she's made the difference in his life.
You've promised your parents, though, that he'll never be institutionalized, that you'll take care of him.
I made a promise to my mom that I'll take care of him, you know, when they die. You know, because then, boy, he's not good. It's like a hard thing to think. Most people think of handicaps, so, you know, it's like a handicapped child. It's like not going, he's not going to go away. You can't wish him into the cornfield, you know. It's not going to be as difficult on me, I think, than it has been on my parents, you know.
Why not?
Well, I have better resources than they have. You know, my dad, he raised us on like $26,000 a year. I still don't know how he did that. You know, especially with an autistic child. And I mean, I have a larger house and all these things. You know, my parents don't want to leave the house they've been in all those years. I mean, they're great people, man. They're really cool. They're amazing. I mean, it's just, even if they weren't my parents, you know, I'm proud of the way that they are. Because they're really different. They don't live through us at all.
Did Branford Marsalis play Billy Crystal's friend and throw Mama from the train? Yes. Did he contribute to the soundtrack of Mo Better Blues? Yes. Was he in School Days, Spike Lee's earlier film? Yes. Will we talk about that and other things if he comes back another time? Yes.
Maybe. Yeah, we will.
Just say see you later and we're out of here.
Peace. See you later.
Bye.
Sports, Kennedys, and comedians. Journalist Dick Schaap joins Bob tomorrow on Later.